I'm John Lentz with City and State, and joining me today is Stephen Spinola, President of the Real Estate Board of New York. Thanks for joining us today.
A pleasure being here.
And now your organization just put out a report earlier this month on the 421A tax credit. This is a controversial tax credit. Some see it as controversial. It's up for renewal this year. Some people want to end it entirely, but your report makes the case that it is essential for New York City, that, quote, New York City would likely experience a sharp drop-off in the production of new housing units without this tax credit. Explain a little more why this is so important.
Well, it's very simple. People will build housing if the economics work. The economics are very difficult in New York City for probably three reasons. One, land costs just is through the roof. We have limited land, and so prices are very high. Construction costs, it costs probably 30% more to build in New York City than it does in New Jersey. Some suggested that a comparable building built in Chicago would cost half the cost of what it would be in New York City. And the third issue is the level of taxation. That in New York City, people have to assume that taxes on multi-family rental apartment buildings would be about 25 to 35% of the gross income of the building. Well, around the rest of the country, in other cities, it's 8%, it's 12%, maybe it's 15%, maybe somewhere it's 18%. So those three items make it impossible. So you need to ease in the tax burden for people to even be able to get their financing and to make the equity commitment. And what 421A does is basically give a period of time for a rebate, or not a rebate, but an exemption of taxes, and then a phase-in so that projects can be incentivized and we can build housing.
And now your report, it concluded that over 5,484 affordable rental units would not be built, as well as close to 14,000 market rate units would not be built if we got rid of 421A. And that's just over the short term, right?
Now, these are projects that are now in the works. They're done with the drawing boards on the planning stages. Some of them are just about to begin or will be beginning. And we've spoken to all of them. And we're not saying that nothing will ever be built on these sites, but they probably won't be rental apartment buildings. They probably won't be affordable units. They could be condominiums, or the projects could be delayed for another 10 years. So there's no question that this combined 19,000 units of housing would not happen if the 421A program goes away today. Would not happen in their current format, which is at least 5,500 of affordable units being built.
Mm-hmm. Now, critics say, look, this is just benefiting luxury developers. There was a story in the Times in February looking at that penthouse at 157, the $150 million penthouse, and noted that its property tax bill this year would be cut 95%. And so you have these examples out there. Look, it's just benefiting the rich guy. How do you answer those criticisms?
What they don't note in that article is, maybe they do in a very quick way, I'm trying to remember it, you cannot repeat that program today. If that building was going ahead today, there is no program that would provide the same exemption program because it was changed in 2008. What they also ignore is that building is now paying well over $5 million annually in taxes. It's going up to $10 million. It was $1.5 billion investment into an area, and it started. When did it start? It started in June of 2009. There was nothing else going into the ground in June of 2009. Plus, it generated a few hundred units of affordable housing. So I don't have a problem defending it, but we shouldn't be talking about a program that doesn't exist anymore. It's been reformed, it's been modified, and we're talking about an existing program. And by the way, 421A, like any other program, should be looked at every few years. It is, and it should be adjusted to meet the changing economics, changing market. And that's what's going on right now about the future of 421A, which expires on June 15th of this year.
And it's one of multiple pieces of legislation that expire in June. There's all these rent regulations that'll be part of the discussion, so all kind of packaged together. Are there any other pieces of that that you could see as part of the final compromise that you would like to see change in one way or the other, or is 421A really the top priority
Well,
for
rent
you?
regulations is a critical issue for my members and for the city of New York. There's 1.1 million units of rent-regulated apartments in the city of New York. Very few people realize that in the 4 boroughs other than Manhattan, the rent differential between rent-regulated apartments and market rate is maybe $150 to $200 a month. Now, that's not an insignificant number, but it's not a lot. In Manhattan, that number is dramatic. We expect rent regulations will be extended. There's a lot of push to try to water down the vacancy decontrol provisions that were created initially in 1993 and then strengthened on behalf of the industry in 1997. But because that was done, we've built more housing in this city because owners, big development companies from across the country never used to build housing in New York City. Why? I believe because they saw no light at the end of the tunnel as it related to controls. With the 97 changes, all of a sudden we had national REITs coming into New York City within a couple of years and making dramatic investments, and as a result, we've had dramatic housing production in over a decade where we hit 25,000 units a year, 30,000 a year. We need to continue that for a couple of decades in order to catch up. So I expect the program will be extended. I expect there may be some minor modifications. We have a few that we would like to see. Why should we be subsidizing somebody who also owns a retreat on the Jersey Shore? So if you've owned another home somewhere else, why would you be subsidized by the city and the state through an owner for your apartment rent in New York City? Doesn't make any sense to me, but that's what the law allows.
And then with 421A again, what do you expect to happen there?
It's all tied to the mayor's ambitious affordable housing program. So he's trying to identify the right ingredients in order to create 80,000 new affordable units, preserve another 120,000. He's also called for the construction of 140,000 market rate units. That's an ambitious plan. So he is putting together the details of that plan. We've had some discussions, as he's discussing with other people. And we expect that there will be an extension of 421A. We expect it'll be modified, that there may be, there's a program called 80-20, which is 80% market, 20% low income. Will we have to call that by different numbers? Maybe. And will the program make sense? Our position is, if the program makes sense, if my members say, hey, we can use that program to build more housing, then we're going to support it. If it doesn't make sense, if my members tell me, wait a minute, nobody's going to do that, we wouldn't do it, it doesn't make economic sense, then we're going to oppose that in Albany. I expect that there will be a program that we can support. We're not there yet, but we look forward to continuing to work with the city to make it happen.
And you're still president of REBNY, but there's president-elect, John Banks. I think you started earlier this month.
Right.
And you're staying on during a transition period. I guess I'm wondering...
It's going to be a boring 3 months. It's only rent regulations, 421A, a few economic incentive programs, and some other things.
But you've been on board for quite some time, nearly 3 decades, I
Yes.
believe, longer than anyone else leading REBNY, and the organization has grown dramatically. I'm wondering, looking back over your time, is there anything that stands out as a remarkable accomplishment, and how did you get to this point, making it such an influential organization?
Look, it's been 3 decades, so it's tough, almost 3 decades, so it's tough to say what did you do. When you ask that question, I immediately think back to 9/11 and the real estate board and the industry's response. You know, the day after, Giuliani had myself and my chairman, along with some other civic and business leaders, sitting in the police academy building to talk about what can we do, how to come up with incentives, how to push New York City to open up Lower Manhattan afterwards. My members committed to find space for people at no cost and things like that. And it was an indication and a demonstration of how much the industry cares about the city of New York. And so long before 9/11, Lower Manhattan at one point had a 25% vacancy rate on their office space. Well, we helped propose a solution to that, which Mayor Giuliani eventually adopted, made some modification. It resulted in, part of it was a conversion of obsolete office buildings to residential. 3 million square feet of residential got developed as a result of that program. And then because it got successful, they've basically ended the program, which is what government tends to do. If a program becomes really successful, well, we don't need it anymore. And so it was, any other city that had a 25% vacancy rate would have been a national disaster. 25% means you had 25 million square feet of empty space in Lower Manhattan at the time. So you look at those things, but what's been the greatest feeling of accomplishment is somehow REBNY has been able to bring the industry together. Every aspect, from building owners, developers, rental and ownership of property, brokers, management people, attorneys, architects, and for most part, we've been speaking as one voice. We've been responding to proposals. We've been suggesting ideas, and we've not just been reactive. We've been proactive in talking about changes to the city charter and so forth. And so as a result, we now have, I think we're approaching 17,000 members. When I started, it was about 4,000. Many of those are residential brokers and agents and commercial. The owners are still very active. But because we have access to every element of the industry, we can understand the problems. We can understand the issues. We can come up with solutions. And it happens to be the most important industry in the city of New York. We generate, the income producing properties generates more than 41% of all of the city's locally generated revenue, period. So this is not a Wall Street town, it's a real estate town. We love Wall Street, we love the bonuses, they buy our apartments and so forth, but it's a real estate town. And so that's why we care so much. And the other thing is 66% of the people that live in New York City rent. So as a result of that, many of the owners are not moving over out of the city at any time soon. The people that build these buildings, they're going to hold on to them. They care about the schools work, is the streets safe, do the cultural institutions work. And I've seen an extraordinarily charitable industry respond time after time to the needs of the city of New York, whether it's the recent response to the explosion that happened on 116th Street. And we came up with 41 apartments that were available to those tenants who were relocated, and for 2 to 4 months, some of them were able to live there basically rent-free until they were able to find others. So what is as I gave you a long answer, I apologize, but it was the ability to function as an industry as one voice most of the time. You know, I'm very proud. I jokingly say I've been there almost 3 decades. We've never had a vote on any issue at the board, but at its executive committee, because we need a consensus. And we function based on what is that consensus. Can't do anything if something passes by one vote within an industry. So we got to pull the industry together and make decisions and do what's best for the city and the industry.
Stephen Spinola, thanks for joining us.
Thank you.